Dear comrades, dear friends, a warm salute on behalf of the Federation of Greek Women, and we express our thanks to World Peace Council and to Ital for hosting us. For the Federation of Greek Women, during 40-year course and action, superficial and peaceful reasoning has never been enough. We have dealt and are dealing with the consequences of interventions, attacks and wars on peoples, especially women. We have pointed out and highlighted each time the deeper, underlying causes, the causes that we must fight against in order to live in a fair and peaceful world, in a society that meets our contemporary needs. We know well that the organization of the economy is based on the competition, on the pursuit of the greatest possible profit for the business groups, leading even to wars. The peoples all around the world have to confront a barbarous, historically outdated system, as well as the governments that serve it, by bringing about the toughest and most ruthless attack against the rights and conquests. It's a merciless war unleashed by the monopolies and those who serve their interests, a war that crushes the rights of the people to war, social security, health, education, culture. In Greece, the Syriza-Anel government cuts down on wages and pensions, loading people with new, unbearable taxes, with the fourth memorandum that has been voted in Greece these days, sacrificing every right for the sake of business groups' profitability, while they do not hesitate to spend several billion euros for military equipment. With the blessings of other bourgeois parties, they go on with the policy of the previous governments of New Democracy and PASOK. They serve consistently the interests of the bourgeois class so as to increase the active role of Greece within the NATO and the European Union for the country's geostrategic upgrading, as they call it. Thus, the country becomes more and more involved in the imperialist planning. Greece is currently participating in 13 NATO missions abroad and spends 2% of its gross domestic product on equipment, giving the country the first place among the NATO European countries. Using refugee flows as a pretext, NATO has been invited and settled in the Aegean Sea. At the same time, the discussion for the remaining of the US bases in Sudan for another 5 more years is in progress. The Greek government gives land and water to the murderers of the peoples, playing the game of sharing on the account of Greek monopolies. In this framework, Turkish aggression in the Aegean is intensifying. Hundreds of violations of the Greek air and maritime space are taking place, while the Turkish government and the bourgeois class of Turkey pose a border issue, not only for Greece, but also for other neighboring countries, challenging even the Treaty of Lausanne. Developments in the Cyprus issue are also very worrying. The promoted solution is a solution of bisection, a two-state solution, far from the position that benefits the Cypriot people. Such solution that benefits the people of Cyprus is for a Cyprus that is united, dominant, with one state entity and no foreign bases and patrons. At the same time, a dangerous situation is in progress in the Balkans as well. Due to the competition among parts of the Fyrom bourgeoisie confronted with the interests of other countries, bourgeois class in the region, in the shadow of the US, EU, and Russian contradictions. Today, except for Syria, imperialist wars are underway in Iraq and Libya, while the conflicts in Ukraine are still on. Outbreaks occur in places where imperialist powers' great rivalries emerge, such as the Caucasus, the Black Sea, the southeastern Mediterranean, and North Africa. In Asia and the Pacific, the concentration of enormous military forces poses enormous dangers for the peoples, since a pretext can turn their neighborhood into a theater of warfare operations. That is why it is necessary for the peoples to understand that the cause of the explosive situation in the region is the competition of the imperialist powers for the control of resources, natural gas and oil, the energy pipelines, the sea freight transport routes, geostrategic control. This competition of the powerful US, European Union, Russian, and Chinese forces aims at dividing and sharing the region. In this process, the bourgeois classes and the governments of the other countries, of course including both Turkey and Greece, also aspire to join in. This claim and competition is not related to the people's interests. On the contrary, these are sacrificed every day and will be sacrificed even with possible war. The immediate victim of this situation is also the thousands of refugees who have been trapped in camps in our country. Thousands of women and children living in inhuman conditions. The existing situation has been a resource of profit for businesses and non-governmental organizations that are lavishly funded for low-quality services. At the same time, the situation has nourished the Nazi Gordon Dawn and other reactionary forces, providing them with the opportunity to organize raids and attacks against refugees and unleash the racist poison on the conscience of women of the families of the populist strata. Comrades and friends, facing all this, we have the responsibility to teach our children the solidarity, the collective action, the militant attitude of life, to teach them how to fight for their rights, for a life without exploitation and oppression. Only in action can the individual fears for the future be combated. The concepts of independence and sovereignty must mean for us that our peoples will have the right to define their present and future by themselves, to diffuse the wealth they produce in a society where they themselves will have the power instead of the monopolies. We must not let our and our children's blood shed for the interests of one or another sector, of the industrialists, the bankers, the ship owners, etc. Women of the popular strata who are led to poverty and refuge due to war have the interest, the right, and the duty to rise up and join their voices against every imperialist war. For the Federation of Greek Women, along with the labor movement, the radical movement of the poor popular strata, defending the homeland is strongly connected to the struggle for release from imperialist associations and imperialist plans, to the struggle for overthrowing the power of monopolies, to the struggle for a life without unemployment, poverty, wars, refuge. We express our solidarity to all the peoples that are fighting. We stand by the people of Syria, by the Palestinian people, who for 69 years now have no home country, condemned to live under the Israeli occupation with the multilateral support of the US and the European Union. No involvement, no participation in the imperialist war. We fight against the provision of ports, airports, and other infrastructure as basis for unleashing imperialist wars, against the participation of Greek military forces in operations out of the country, for the return of all the Greek military forces from NATO and EU missions, for the realization of the demand of the people, neither land nor water to the murderers of the peoples, for the withdrawal of the NATO force from the Aegean Sea, for the release of our country from NATO and EU. Wish you strength to the struggles that are to come. We go on, organizing our fight for a life without exploitation, oppression, wars, and refugees. Thank you very much.